Goldaka, shall we start in another 1 minute? It's
Shall we? Yes.
sir. Good evening, sir. Srihari, sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Shall we start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have around 205 participants. We shall start.
Yeah. So good evening to all. To this to the fourth day of the 7-day FDP organized by Mannar Thirumalai Naicker College, Madurai, and A.P.C Mahalaxmi College for Women, Thoothukudi, along with the IQAC Cluster. So we have seen 3 wonderful sessions, and we have got very good feedback, positive comments pouring in from all parts of India as to the inputs people have received, and we are very happy about the success of this program. And today, this is the 4th day, and we have Mr. Srihari Pingle with us again, clusterite. And he's here to share with us knowledge about best practices. Actually, different practices are followed in various institutions, and every institution has its own unique practice as which is identified as a best practice. And we are in the dark when it comes to showing it in for NAC purpose, which can be called a best practice, which sorry, I lost connection. So when knowledge sharing is just caring. So when we share the best practices of our institution with others, we feel that it ensures a better performance and productivity. Ultimately, it is for the enhancement of the individual, the institution, as well as the whole nation when we consider that. So today we have an eminent speaker with us, and I hand over the session to Dr. Yogeshwari Nitya, our IQAC member and assistant professor of chemistry, who will be the moderator for this session. And I also acknowledge the presence of Dr. Sankar. Welcome, sir. And now over to Nitya. Nitya.
Thank you, ma'am. Warm greetings from A.P.C Mahalaxmi College for Women, Thoothukudi. Good evening to one and all. Once again, I welcome you all to the 4th day, 7-day FDP program organized by our college and Mannar Thirumalai Naicker College. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker of the day, Mr. Srihari Pingle. He is working as an assistant professor and coordinator IQAC at Sangamner Nagarpalika Arts, DJ Malpani Commerce and DN Sharda Science College, Sangamner, Maharashtra. He is one of the founder members of IQAC Cluster. In a short career of 14 years, he has served as IQAC coordinator for 11 years and as vice principal for 2 years. He is a member of governing council for his college under autonomous status. He is a meritorious student and also an active researcher. With around a dozen publications in peer-reviewed journals, he has also published 19 textbooks. He has also completed 1 minor research project funded by UGC. And his significant contributions are he had played an instrumental role in setting star status for his college under DBT Star College Scheme, Government of India. Apart from organizing 8 national and 8 international conferences, he has also organized Inspire internship camps twice, funded by DST, Government of India. He is a member of Task Force for Screening and Evaluating proposals under the Star College Scheme by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, New Delhi. He is a honorary fellow of the Zoological Society of India. For his contribution to academics, he has been awarded International Best Teacher Award in 2017. He also received Education Icon Award in the year 2019 by Technoprolas for his contribution to academic excellence. Under UGC scheme of mentoring Parmash, he mentored 7 colleges for NAC accreditation. He also delivered more than 350 talks on NAC assessment and accreditation individually and for RUSA and HRD across the country. He is a popular speaker on soft skills, career guidance, motivation, leadership, and excellence in higher education. I welcome you, sir. Now, I'll hand over the session to our resourceful resource person. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Before I proceed, let me check if I'm audible and the screen is visible.
Yes, sir, you are audible and the screen is clearly visible, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
A bit loud.
Congratulate Internal Quality Assurance of Mannar Thirumalai Naicker College and A.P.C Mahalaxmi College for Women Thoothukudi for taking up this wonderful theme in organizing this 7-day FDP for participants across the nation.
Warm welcome to the Unearthing celebrations. I request that PJ Kumar.
Playing in the background somewhere. Yeah, thank you. I'm a part of WhatsApp group where all the resource person, they are sharing a common platform, and every day I'm listening to, in fact, reading the feedbacks. And in fact, in one of the statements that I had made on the group, I said that it is a kind of performance pressure that remaining speakers are facing, because all the other speakers are performing so well, and the expectations of the participants, they also increase with every new talk that is coming up. All credit to organizers because the things are so meticulously planned. Even though in the morning I told Dr. Lily that I would be joining by 3:45, did not fail to remind me again at 3:45 that we have started and we are online now. So thank you very much for inviting for this FDP. And of course, the topic that has been given to me is best practices. With all due respects to dignitaries, principals of both the colleges, directors, management representatives, and participants, of course, fellow trustees and advisors from IQAC Cluster, Professor Kangude sir, Dr. Sankar sir, who has been with all of us for the last 4 days or so. I'll begin my presentation. Now, this best practice thing is here for last 20 years or so. We have been talking about it, even in the earlier manuals, in the earlier cycles as well, 3rd cycle, 2nd cycle, 1st cycle. We have been talking about it, best practices. But the common phenomena that was prevailing across the nation was that, you would do many things during your assessment period. And at the end of it, when you're about to submit your SSR, you would probably pick 1 or 2 things that you thought you were doing best. And then write down maybe 500 words about those 2 practices which you thought are best. So this is how the things were going. I'm afraid even today, there are not many people who actually understand what best practices are. It is not that you have to pick up the best practices. It is that you have to nurture best practices. And in fact, all the themes which have been given, all the topics which have been given by the organizers, they go in line with the topic. In fact, the broad theme of this FDP, equip, enhancing quality. And this I feel is closest to your base theme, enhancing quality, best practices. This is one way of enhancing quality in every arena, every section, every avenue of higher education. So let us begin with the presentation and see how we can nurture best practices in our institution. Now, this is the reason why we are talking about best practices. This question used to be there at the end of every criterion in the earliest manual, if you remember it correctly. So if there was a criteria, for example, curricular aspect, so at the end of it, there used to be a question, best practices in curricular aspect. Then you had criterion 2, teaching, learning and evaluation. So they would ask a question, best practices in teaching, learning and evaluation. It has been, I guess, during the last manual and this manual that they have shifted it to criterion 7. And they ask only one question. What are those best practices that you have? Give at least 2 best practices. Now, the amazing thing about it, what makes it more important is that in criterion 7, there are as many as 11 questions, 11 metrics in 7.1, the key indicator 7.1. And 11 questions have a weightage of 50 marks. A weightage of 50 for 11 questions. The remaining 2 questions, that is 7.2.1 and 7.3.1, they have weightage of 50 marks, out of which best practices has the weightage of 30. Try to understand this. In criterion 7, carrying weightage of 100, 11 questions in 7.1 carry a total weightage of 50. 11 questions, weightage of 50. 7.2, 1 question alone, best practices, weightage of 30. And 7.3, institutional distinctiveness, 1 question alone, carrying a weightage of 20. That makes these questions very, very significant. That way, what best practices can do is fetch you as many as 120. Because see, when the peer team would come to you for a visit, they would award you on the scale of 0 to 4. So in case they award you 0 for this particular question, you will get 0. If they award you 1 for this question, you will get 30 into 1, that means 30. If they award you 2, you will get 60. And if they award you 4, you will get 120. So that 120 becomes part of the total of 4,000 marks that you can get. Try to understand this calculation. Even though it may appear that 120 is a small number as compared to 4,000, but all such questions, they significantly improve your CGPA. And this one question, if you poorly perform in this question, you are losing it. So to get those 120 marks, it is important to understand what best practices are, how can you nurture those best practices, and how can you sustain the quality that is reflected through these best practices. Going ahead, there's a famous poetry in Hindi. I do not know, since I am in southern part of India, I do not know how many of you have heard it, but I am sure you all know Amitabh Bachchan. And Amitabh Bachchan's father, Harivansh Rai Bachchan, was a famous poet. And his most famous poetry was Koshish Karne Walon Ki Haar Nahi Hoti, which in English means try till you succeed. You need to keep trying so that finally you achieve success. Koshish Karne Walon Ki Haar Nahi Hoti, a very famous poem in Hindi. Try till you succeed. Now, the whole approach of quality enhancement in any organization, whether educational organization or an industry, is PDCA, which we all know. So before we do anything, we have to plan for it. We have to implement it and check whether the things are going as per plan or not. And if there is something which is not as per the expectation, you probably are lacking in your basic process, in your strategy, in your planning. So rectify upon it, come back again, act on the mistakes and come back again, make a revised plan so that finally you go on improving. That is the whole philosophy of quality enhancement. That is all what we know. Now, the question that has been asked by NAC in their manual in 7.2.1 is describe 2 best practices successfully implemented by the institution as per NAC format provided in the manual. You have to describe 2 best practices. And as I said, very common practice that institutions have is they do n number of things. And out of those n number of things, while they are writing their SSR, or now when they are writing their AQARs, say for example, 15th May is now the deadline for submission of AQR 2021. The IQAC will sit up and discuss in their meeting that out of these 10 things, what do you think is the best practice? What should we list this year in the AQAR? And I must tell you very clearly that best practices do not work like this. The whole notion of best practices is that you want to improve upon each and every processes that is governing your institution, each and every process. It can be admission of the student. Can you make admission as one of the best practices? It can be ethics in publications, research publication. Can you make it as a best practice? It can be welfare measures for your teaching staff and non-teaching staff. Can you make it a best practice? Or it can be an eco-friendly campus. It can be anything. But when you try and focus upon each and every process, each and every aspect in your institution, what you dream of is that you are performing best in everything. That will take you to a CGP of 4. That will take you to an A++ grade. That will probably make you the best institution. So it is actually an effort to make yourself best rather than making only your practices as best. Now, if you go through NAC's website and look at one of these uploads that they have, best practices in higher education for quality management by NAC. This is uploaded on their website, NAC's website. What does it read? It reads that the practices which add commendable value to an institution and its various stakeholders are considered as reliable benchmarks or standards of quality. Practices which add commendable value to an institution and its various stakeholders. So see, because we are talking about various stakeholders, so it can be student, it can be teacher, it can be society, it can be alumni, it can be anybody. And that should lead to you making it as a benchmark, standard of quality. I always talk about, I was going through Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya scheme yesterday through the website. And Ramanujan College, Delhi tops the list in conducting FDPs through Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya scheme for teacher education. Hundreds of FDPs they have conducted, in contrast to some very reputed university, even in southern India and even in Maharashtra, who have conducted only 20 or 30 odd FDPs through Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya mission. So now what Ramanujan College does as far as organization of FDP is set up a standard, because I see that if Ramanujan College can conduct hundreds of FDPs, why not other colleges conduct at least 50 of them? So what standards do you set as far as quality is concerned? A similar kind of standard probably would have been set by the organizers of this FDP. Other organizers would, look for quality speakers. Other organizers would look for, I was told that there were around 650 participants yesterday. I do not know how many have joined today. 403 already. You normally do not see this many participants and staying back till 6 p.m. Difficult job. That means either speakers are very good, or 600 participants are just, logging in and going here and there, which is not the case. That means it's a wonderful organization. So that is kind of benchmark that is expected to be set in an organization. Another statement, institutional excellence in higher education is the aggregate of best practices followed in different areas of institutional performance. Please try to understand this. This is what I was saying. If I'm performing good, say for example, my results are very good and my students are meritorious, and I quote it as best practices, I should not be stopping there. I just cannot stop there, because this is one area where I'm performing well. But for my institution to be called as best institution in Tamil Nadu, maybe, I need to perform well in all other sectors, all other areas of higher education. So it is an aggregate of best practices in different areas of institutional performance. You have so many other areas to concentrate upon. You have curriculum designing, you have curriculum delivery, you have feedback mechanism, and we'll be talking about what other areas can be explored. So please do not remain in an understanding or in a thought process that you are doing 10, 20 things, and out of those 10, 20 things, people sometimes come to me and say that, sir, we have identified 20 best practices, and out of these, we have identified these 2 to be quoted in the SSR. No. If you have identified only 20 processes in your institution as best practices, I guess you are missing a lot. The way you look at the whole thing, your perception, how do you look at the thing makes a difference. For example, if a student gets 60% marks in an examination, there are 2 ways to look at it. I would say, oh my God, first class student. But somebody else would say he does not know 40% of the things. He could not score 40%. So if I say I have 20 odd best practices in my institution, that means there are many which you have not developed as best practices. So we have to look into all these things from a different mirror, from a different set of spectacles. And what you do out of this, when you are establishing best practices, you are establishing benchmarks. As I said just now, no? When you look at Ramanujan College, you feel that you should be doing it like this. When you look at certain speaker, for example, Professor Pahade yesterday, you would say, I want to deliver a talk like what Professor Pahade was doing. I heard that I could not attend any of these talks, but I heard a lot of good words about even respected Dr. Sankar, sir. You would like to present like Dr. Sankar, like he presented NEP in front of all of you. So that is kind of benchmark that is expected to be set. Now, what is this benchmarking? This is a famous advertisement that most of us have seen, and similar advertisements. Why is my sari whiter than the shirt of guy, or vice versa? Detergent powder, Tide detergent powder. Chonk gaye, it says in Hindi. Chonk gaye. I mean, astonished. Astonished of what? The whiteness of the shirt that this guy is having. So start comparing whether my shirt is shiny as compared to the sari of the other lady standing over there. So when you compare your quality of performance, you compare it with your earlier performances, and you also compare it with the performance of other institutions. And therefore, this benchmarking can be of 2 sorts. One is something called as internal benchmarking. Internal benchmarking means it's a kind of introspection that we should be doing. And we do not do it often. We do it, the introspection, when we probably go to some other college and see, oh, we do not have an infrastructure like this. Our management is not, cooperative. Our principal he does not listen to. I've told him so many times, etc., etc. When we are cribbing, we are doing introspection. When I say introspection as an institution, what was the result of students last year? And can I improve upon it in the present year? What was the performance as far as research is considered in last 5 years? Can I improve upon it in the coming years? What is the kind of process that I have with regards to admission of students in my institution? Is it transparent? Is it effective? Is it less time consuming, or does it consume a lot of time as far as students are concerned? Can I improve upon it? This sort of internal benchmarking that I need to do. What I had, what I am today, and how I can improve upon it. That is internal benchmarking. So we have several parameters, and simplest way to find these parameters is go through NAC manual. Every question gives you a parameter, and you can have some other standards as well, your internal standards as well. Does not matter whether NAC has asked it or not. You can have several internal standards as well. Ask yourself those questions. Can I improve upon it? That is internal benchmarking. And second is external benchmarking. What is this external benchmarking? The external benchmarking is I should be listening to the talks of other speakers as well. Can I take something good from them, which I didn't in last 4 days? Can I take something good from them? Maybe the way they present, maybe the extent to which they prepare themselves before they deliver the talk, maybe the PowerPoint presentation and homework gone into it, maybe the voice modulation, maybe the command on language or the subject, etc., etc. So similarly, Mannar Thirumalai Naicker College, Madurai, and A.P.C Mahalaxmi College for women, they can do this external benchmarking. Did A.P.C Mahalaxmi College for women compare itself with Mannar Thirumalai Naicker College? Number of courses that these colleges are offering. Who amongst you is offering more courses, more programs? Who amongst you is offering more vocational programs? Who amongst you is having more number of students? Who amongst you is having better results? Who amongst you is having more faculties with PhDs? Who amongst you is fetching more grants? Who amongst you has higher impact factor publications and so on? That is external benchmarking. So you compare yourself with others, and accordingly, the whole idea of doing this is you want to improve upon all other existing processes, so that you can scale up your quality in all the processes. Now, how do we do that? How do we do this? How do we bring in this benchmarking? There are several ways. One of the ways is audit, which we are not going to detail in today. Academic and administrative audit one can do. Even gender audit is a kind of benchmarking process. A green audit is a benchmarking process. So any review that you are taking, audit means review. Audit means welcoming the suggestions. So if you are taking a review, suggestions are bound to come. And if you work on those suggestions, improvements are bound to happen, and that's why the audits. Audits are not formalities that you need to finish, sign up a paper and submit to NAM. Audit is a review mechanism which welcomes the suggestion, which worked upon leads to improvement in quality, as simple as that. And for you to introspect yourself and know about yourself, you sometimes need to do an exercise such as this, a SWOT analysis. So I guess before you start with your best practices and everything like this, each one of us, every teacher of the institution should be aware of the audit reports, academic and administrative audit reports. If not academic and administrative audit report, their earlier peer team report, if they go through, they would realize what their institution is. See, we are in a habit of calling our institutions as the best, and we know in and out about our institution. There are places, there are areas where we are lagging behind. There are some gray areas. So when you perform SWOT analysis meticulously and honestly, I said, what you would realize is that there are certain areas where you are doing well, strengths, areas where you are doing well, your strengths, positives. But there are also areas where you need to improve. For example, I would say that in last 4 or 5 years, I do not have any research grants in my institution. Research grants, I said, not much of them. Policies can be anything. Maybe the government is not giving the grants, but that does not mean I should not be having research grants. So this is something I need to improve upon as an autonomous institution. That probably is my weakness for last 3 or 4 years. Negative. But there is another positive that we have, is our goals. When I write in my mission, holistic development through research, value education, etc., that reminds me of my goal that I need to excel in research as well. So if I look at the goals, I'm aware of my opportunities. And the last one is the obstacles that I might be having on my path to success, on my path to excellence. And those obstacles are challenges. It used to be SWOT analysis, you all know. But since threat is pretty negative word, they omitted it and replaced it with challenges. So we may have challenges, several challenges. And even in the best practice, the format that we have in the best practice, in last they ask, what are the challenges? What are the problems encountered? So you may have problems at them. But what we are supposed to do is convert the weaknesses into strength? There are areas where I'm weak. Can I convert that research funding into my strength? I'm lacking research funding right now. Can I strategize it in such a way that I will fetch funds, resources will be mobilized so that this weakness that I'm having will be converted into one of my strengths? I know that there are certain goals that I foresee. I know that there are certain opportunities available to me. Can I make use of these opportunities and convert them into strengths? I know that there are challenges in front of me. Can I overcome those challenges? Can I overcome those obstacles and lead to strengths? This is the whole essence of having best practices in your institution. So as of now, it might sound a little theoretical to you that I'm talking a little philosophical. But if you understand this basic philosophy, then only you'll be able to nurture the best practices in your institution. So I would advise all of you to sit together and honestly carry out this exercise. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your challenges? And what are the opportunities available to you? And I'm sure as soon as you write your strengths, you would say, these are my best practices. Now, what are other practices which you want to convert them into best practices? Are the practices which are falling in the remaining 3 quadrants. The practices which are there in weaknesses, the practices which are in their opportunities quadrant, and the practices or the processes which are in this quadrant, challenges, are yet to be converted into best practices. And those which are already in this first quadrant have been established in best practices. This is the best way to identify. So carry out a SWOT analysis. Now, coming to the ground, how will you do it on the ground? Now, this is not something that I have come up with myself. 4I1D model. Again, as I said, go through this document, which is a report, in fact, which has been uploaded on the NAC's website, and you will find this. This is a 4I1D model. And look at this picture at the background. The seedling which is getting germinated is like a process you are nurturing in your institution. Take any process for that matter. Maybe functioning of IQAC. In many institutions, even now, IQAC sometimes is not functional. They look up at everything in the 4th year or AQR to AQR now, because AQR has been made mandatory submission online every year. So if you think that IQAC is not functional, IQAC is not active, you have to water it. You have to provide nourishment to it. You have to provide manure, fertilizers to it, efforts, resources, finances, encouragement, and so on. And so that seedling will gradually grow and become a tree bearing fruits. So what is this 4I1D? When you had performed that SWOT analysis exercise, in the remaining 3 quadrants, that is weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, you found those processes, those areas which you thought you need to improve upon. Like I said, maybe research funding that I'm not having for the last few years. So the first step is identification, which probably you have done either through SWOT analysis or through administrative and academic audit or through any other audit or through NAC peer teams reports, whatever, or through internal meetings. So identify the best practices. Rather, I would say identify the practices which you want to nurture into best practices. Point number 1. So in this case, I have identified research funding as the practice that I need to nurture into a best practice. So point number 1 is identify. I hope I'm clear and slow enough for all to understand this. So it is not identification of practice that has been already established as best practice. It is identification of the practice which you think needs to be nurtured into a best practice. Then, once you have identified a practice to be nurtured into a best practice, what you need to do is plan and strategize. Plan and strategize in such a way that you implement the best practice in what we call as a pilot scale, on a small scale. See, somebody came up with a wonderful idea. Like say, I am not having research funding. So somebody said, sir, despite going for UGC and your university, affiliating university, you should be exploring more funding agencies. I know some of the NGOs who are offering fundings. So I need some alternatives, right? And then we tried exploring the NGOs and some industries for providing research funds. Then who would apply to it? So somebody who wanted to take the lead, he said, okay, I will do it. I'll try a send proposal, see if it is working or not. He sends a proposal. So you do something at a pilot level, pilot scale. That is called as implementation of the best practice. And if that works, you will not stop there. If that works, you will percolate the message to all other teachers saying that I had applied for ICSSR, and I could get funds. Now you should also be applying for it. You should be applying to British Council. You should be applying for research to Reserve Bank of India. I'm talking about those agencies which are giving funds for research and conferences and seminars, other than UGC and your local, your affiliating universities, etc. So when you take the practice which you thought will work in your institution, from pilot scale to the institutional level, that is the third I, institutionalization. Lastly, what you do is internalization. Once you do it, and once you see that things are working well at the institutional level, you want to make it habit. You want to make it habit. It should not stop. And then you switch over to another practice, making it as a best practice. So idea is converting each practice into a best practice. And like very aptly, Dr. Lily Golda was saying that knowledge is all about sharing. So once you feel that you have developed a best practice, share it with the society. And that is why NAC insists that you put your best practices on your institutional website. NAC has also made a list of the best practices run in various institutions across the nation, because when you share those best practices, other colleges will try to not copy it. Other colleges will try to get something out of it so that they can also improve upon several areas in their institution. So dissemination is, giving what you know to the society so that they also can improve, create a win-win kind of situation where you are concerned about not only your development, you are concerned about the growth and development of the nation. We'll go further and try to understand each one of this. So first one is identification. As I have already described in the SWOT analysis, the identification of the practice which you need to nurture as the best practice can only be done when you are dynamic and revisit your processes periodically. What I mean from periodically is, you have conducted an audit in, say, for example, 5 years, once in 5 years, then you do it in the next assessment year. No. Whether formal or informal, you have to keep revisiting your processes, your strategies, your functioning periodically from time to time. And I'm so happy with this AQR system that NAC has developed now through online documentation, is you have to go through it every year. So every year you are aware of what are those areas where you are lacking, what are those areas where you are performing well. Second is, we have to recognize that there is a lot of diversity in terms of history and culture in our institution. There are people from several backgrounds. They have in fact, they have different requirements, different expectations. They all come from different historical contexts as well. And therefore, your practices should be such that they satisfy the needs of these people coming from diverse backgrounds, your students, your stakeholders, other stakeholders, including parents and employers as well. You also need to ensure when you are identifying any particular process to be converted into a best practice, that it should not lead to dominance of one specific view or approach. In that way, I am a big critic on forcing of research into teaching in higher education, making it mandatory. That probably is not making it as best practice. It is bringing in malpractices rather than best practices. I do not know whether you would agree with me or not, but this is my opinion. When you make one specific domain very, very dominant, then there is every chance that many other processes will remain at the hindsight. And so you need to find the right balance. For example, we have student research scheme as one of the best practices in my institution. But I should not be emphasizing it so much that students lose focus on rest of the academics. So your best practice that you are thinking about should not lead to dominance of one specific view or approach. For example, I will whatever speak, I'll be speaking on the basis of the experiences that I had. There was a time where extension activities were emphasized too much in our institution. Too much. We were doing fantastically well in extension activities. But later we came to know that because of the extension activities and too much involvement in the extension activities, there was a set of students who are lagging behind a lot in the studies. Even now there is a few students like that. And therefore, we have to ensure that it should not lead to dominance of one specific view or approach. Point number 4, it should of course promote the quality or performance. And then your best practices that you want to have should be focusing on variables such as, what variables? They should be focusing on pedagogy. They should be focusing on the goals, institutional goals. They should be focusing on global concerns, local context, learners, the nature of learners that you have, competencies of the staff, infrastructure, governance requirements, and so on. So now if you look at this word art that I am sharing here, word web that I am sharing here, and carefully read them, you would realize this is nothing but criterion 1 to criterion 7. Right from pedagogy to the learners, to the infrastructure, to global competency, to governance, etc., etc. This is nothing but criterion 1 to criterion 7. So the best way to find out the practices you want to convert them into best practices is to go through all the criteria and gradually improve upon them. Now, if you have found out one, there's a big fear, that is that you have identified and you make tall claims. There's a big fear that you may not implement it. So this second step becomes very important. Of course, the first one is crucial. You have to identify the practice you need to convert into best practice. The second one is implemented. And why I'm afraid that it may not be implemented is because of this thing which Jacob Bronowski said. She's author of The Ascent of Man, and in her book, The Ascent of Man, she said, we have to move from notions of words as wisdom to action as wisdom. To some of you, the talk that I'm delivering, it may sound very good, and you would be wondering, oh, wonderful, what speaker? But some of you would also ask that if he's delivering and telling all these things to us, did he perform the same thing in his institution? So my wisdom is in not telling you what should be done. My wisdom should be all about what I have done my institution. So in our profession, we are very much habituated to talk and talk a lot, that we will do this, we should be doing this, we ought to do this, we must do it, etc., etc. But then if in the meeting principal asks who will be doing it, so everybody, okay, give it to somebody else. This is a very common practice that we have, and we witness it every day and the other. So this is something that we must take care of. Another important statement which was made by Father of Nation Mahatma Gandhi: we must be the change that we wish to see in the world. In Marathi, they say that Shivaji Janmala ala pahije pan shezari. That means every, active person, if you want, to improve the society, leave it for others to improve the society. I will just, hold my hands and sit quietly. Let others do the things. So Mahatma Gandhi ji said, in fact, that we must be the change that we wish to see in the world. So instead of talking, we need more actions. And be the change before the change changes you. Be the change. Don't wait for others to change. Don't ask people not to spit on the roads. If you are spitting, stop it. So how do you implement your best practices? For that, the first thing is you will require planning. Like I said, no, I'm lacking research funding. So what do? I'll plan. Look for other funding agencies. Maybe even then people say, no, I'm still not getting funding. Funding agencies, ICSSR is not providing any funding. I said, no, the problem is not with ICSSR. The problem is with the proposal that we are sending. If your proposal is good, anybody is going to give you grants. Whether it is Stride, BHU, whether it is SERB, SERB in science, or whether any other organization. So if you are having planning, you need resource mobilization. That we'll see when I'll be explaining the best practice that I have in my institution. You may require money for it. You may require infrastructure for it to function. So do you have any planning? And then can you mobilize resources for it? You also need capacity building. See, in my institution, I keep workshops on very simple things. On Monday, 25th, I have kept a workshop which I'll be conducting for my teachers. A very simple workshop on Canva, not Canvas, Canva. Canva is a website where you can generate your own flyers, brochures, etc., etc. Many of you would be aware of it. And there are several others. But these are very small things. So if I feel that, I'm not getting research funds in my institution, and I find one of the reasons as poor research proposals, I need to make aware about how to write a good proposal. That is capacity building. If then I can do it, then I need to monitor. I need to monitor how many proposals were sent and how many proposals were shortlisted or funded. And if things are working well, good. Evaluate what was the kind of proposal, who all were good with their proposal, who all were rejected, and how they can improve. So again, as I said, the PDCA cycle. So that would lead to improvement. I'll give you another example. I want the admissions in postgraduate courses to improve. One of the challenges that we have in MA programs, we do not have much of admissions. They are struggling with the admissions. So if I want to improve admission in postgraduate courses, or maybe I want to attract students to basic sciences, I need to do some planning, for example. So I would go to DBT and say that give me some funds under Star College scheme. Or I would go to postgraduate teachers and say that revise your syllabus with requirements to maybe the society, employers, or civil services, etc. So planning. They would say that, sir, I require computers, I require a classroom, I require some additional teachers, I require German, French teachers, etc., etc. Whatever. That would require resource mobilization. Then somebody would say, I'm not trained for this. Offer them training. And monitor if the things are working. And if you feel that things are working, then you are probably now nurturing a best practice, or your practice is going to be converted into best practice. So there are lots of questions, there are lots of problems. The way you solve the problem would probably at the end of it would lead to generation of one best practice. And once you realize that, okay, yes, I could do it for MA Hindi, can I replicate the same for MA English or MA Sanskrit and so on? You believe it or not, in our college, we have a research center in Sanskrit, the only research center in Sanskrit as far as Savitribai Phule Pune University is concerned, and who is doing wonderfully well. So if in Savitribai Phule Pune University, MA Sanskrit in Sangamner College can do it, why cannot we do it in yoga? So from doing it on pilot scale, now moving to institutional scale. So institutionalization is the third step. Institutionalization is an effort to make the practice more institution-centric than a leader or individual-centric or a department-centric. I had received few invitations, and for their satisfaction, I had in fact delivered a talk on that particular topic, which I do not agree to. And they said, sir, can you deliver a talk on best practices in zoology, best practices in life sciences? So I was taken a little aback, because if you are working for a college, I do not want best practices in life sciences. But yes, if you really want to improve your department, we can go for it. But looking at, because we are offering best practices of the institution in the SSR, we really cannot put best practice of a zoology department for that matter. We have to put a practice which is applicable to the institution as a whole. So if I have done it for MA in Hindi, I have to replicate in all of the postgraduate programs. This is the way how the best practices work. The fourth one is internalization. Now you look at this image. This is image with credit to Daily Mail. And here you can see the man, a power lifter, lifting a cow on his shoulders. And you can also look at the quote by Aristotle. It says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. Whether you are a teacher, whether you are a cricketer, whether you are an orator, whether you are a singer, it is a habit, just like a failure, it is a habit. And you need to make best practices also as a habit. You just cannot leave them isolated once you have established as the best practice. Because once you leave them isolated, then probably they will come to standstill. They will become stagnated, and they will probably in coming time lose the effect. So internalization means making it your habit. Say, for example, you are working on the results of the students on the teaching learning process pedagogy. And after a hard work of 5 years, you found that you have improved by 20% as far as the results of students is concerned. And after you thought that it has established as the best practice, you immediately came back to your earlier methods of teaching. And soon you would start seeing the fall in the results again. Just like COVID. When there was pandemic at peak, you all were wearing masks, you're using sanitizers, etc., several other methods. Social distancing, etc. But as soon as you think that the number of patients are going down, you remove your mask, you stop sanitizing your hands, you do not take care of social distancing, and then the number of patients go on increasing again. Same is with best practice. As soon as you stop monitoring them, the quality content of the practices will go down. So you have to be consistent in your practices, in following those practices. That is called as internalization. Make it a habit. And I'll prove through the best practices that I'm having that it is having all these features. And therefore, I can claim that the practices I'm offering and telling you are the best practices. Last one, that means 4I, 1D. So 1D is dissemination of these best practices. We all must realize that education is not an industry, it is a social process. We are attached to the society. And therefore, dissemination of these practices is a necessary requirement to ensure that these processes find wider application in the system. It is whole system. The education system does not work in Sangamner alone. Education system does not work in Thoothukudi or Madurai alone. Education system is working at a global level, not even in India. So if I'm having something good, and if world gets it, can the people across the world make use of it and improve in their processes? Therefore, the whole focus is to learn and benefit from each other's experience. And how you can do it? share these practices through databases, through forums, recording the evidence of success. This is important. And I will be elaborating more on this aspect. Yeah, so in Hindi, there is a song, Jyot se Jyot jagate chalo. So you have a candle which you have enlightened, hand it over to others. Let them enlighten other candles as well. Let the whole world be enlightened with the knowledge that you are having. So that is dissemination of the best practice. And that is why we should be uploading our best practices on institutional website. Now, as I said, you have to internalize, make it as a habit. So sustainability of the best practices required. And why do you require the sustainability of the best practice? Because you know that the practice that you have today has relative advantage over the preceding practice. If the results were not coming good with the earlier practice, you improved upon your practice, teaching, learning practice, so that the results have improved. So your present practice is better than the earlier practice. Therefore, you have to sustain, keep going with this practice. You have to ensure that the practice that you have generated as best practice is compatible to institutional context and culture. So many times we are doing this and you are doing that. But is it your responsibility? There were many institutions who told me that, sir, we are doing this social work. I mean, fine, you have some noble causes, but is it your prime duty as an educational institution to feed somebody a roti or chapati? Instead of that, you have several other academic problems in your institution. So before you solve the problems in the society, please solve the problems in your institution. So compatibility to institutional context is important. Divisibility or availability in small parts as related to whole. Now, this is another way of looking at the best practice. I told you, when you do it on the pilot scale, you perform it on, a small department, small set of people, and then you want it to be replicated at the institutional level. The other way around, I would say that I'm doing an activity at institutional level and I have some 420 participants in one activity. I'll give you an example. Last year, we had a student research scheme in which 420 students participated. Now, my point is, if I distribute this 420 and would like to see how many students from each department participated, was this 420 an outcome of only science departments, or only art students, or only commerce students? If this number 420 is coming out of only from science students, then I won't say that this is a best practice. So if I go through this best, 420, the figure of 420, and find that there are at least 4 or 5 students from every department, I would say, yes, this is a best practice. So when I divide this practice into small parts and I see that it is representing everywhere, I'll be sure that this is generating into a best practice. Another important thing is the practices that you are generating as the best practice and you want to sustain it. It should be free from complexity. See, the problem is many practices, they are started well, but they are not continued. For that matter, even, I was going through the website of our education ministry, education.nic.in. They all had started with Swachh Campus Awards, Swachhata Abhiyan Awards. It went well in 2018 and 19 and thereafter stopped. Green Champion Awards. Green Champion proposals have been asked by Tamil Nadu government also recently. I guess 15th was the last date for it. But the MHRD thing, it stopped. So when there are certain things which are not monitored, either they are not monitored, it will stop, or if it is very complex, people will not take it up. The reason probably people are not going for NIRF is the same, too complex to actually do it. So freedom from complexity is what should be there, and communicability. Just like, the COVID virus communicates easily from one person to another. These best practices should be highly communicable. If I'm doing something, it should be communicable so that you take it, oh, so much interesting, I want to do it as well. It should be communicable. I remember 2020, 2019, in fact, The first Zoom meeting snapshot which I found was by IQAC Cluster only. I was not part of that meeting. White Code has conducted first Zoom meeting. I was never aware of this Zoom meeting. And when I saw this, I was astonished. My principal came to me. In fact, my principal had received the snapshot of the Zoom meeting. And I said, no, I want to do it. And immediately in April, we organized one workshop on Zoom. That was again through White Code. But thereafter, since everybody liked it, the online thing is working well. These video conferencing working well. Somebody was telling that during my introduction that I'm a part of DBT's task force for shortlisting of the Star College proposals. Even they are now going for this thing only. Why should I be going to Delhi? They would make arrangements for hotel. They would make arrangements for flights, food, etc., etc. If this can be done in video conferencing. So this is kind of communicability. It should be readily taken up by others. Now, I'll skip few slides and come to the format now. So now that we have understood that in a best practice, I need to be focused on this 4I1D. It's time that I have generated best practice and I write the best practice as per the NAAC's guidelines. And what are those guidelines? You write a title. This title has to be very catchy. You cannot write a very big title. Title has to be catchy. I'll give you examples of how you can make titles catchy. You need to have objectives for having that best practice. For example, as I said, research funding. If I want to convert into best practice, the objective would be to get research funds, mobilize research funds from various funding agencies, to promote the teachers for taking up research, to promote the teachers to be innovative, to promote the teachers to register for IPR, etc., etc. Those can be various objectives. But what is the context? I said, for doing all these things, I need funds which are not available to me. So that is the context. Instead, in spite of all the seed money I could offer to my teachers, that is not good enough for me to take up good research. So that is the context. So objective that you want to have some research, quality research in your institution, some research output in your institution. The context is the fund is not available. So the practice. You have conducted several workshops for teacher to write a good proposal. You have written proposal to various funding agencies, and you have evidence of success that are out of the number of proposals that you have written, for example, 20, 25, 30 by your teachers, 15 could get funds, and the amount of funds fetched in last 5 years is this much. That is the evidence of success. But during this, you may encounter certain problems. What can those problems be? Teachers are not readily available for writing the proposals. They do not agree to write the proposals because they are not interested in research maybe sometimes. What other problems you can see? Teachers are not very happy with the utilization process, the accounts, the audits, etc. So when you encounter with such problems, you list the problems, you make, take care of these problems. For example, I'm afraid of these audit things. Let me work. Don't ask me how much amount, how much was utilized, where is the balance amount, what is the interest generated, now submit the interest, etc., etc. I am having brains to work. Let this be with the account section. So how can you streamline the auditing process in your institution, financial auditing process in your institution? So are you taking care of the problems? If you do this, your practice will generate into best practice. You can write all these things. But if you are failing somewhere, if you are encountering some problems, find solution to this. If auditing is one of the problem in your institution, find solution to this, improve your practice, come back again. So you have improved version of best practices in your institution. And so you will see the improved output as well. Now I'll give you a few examples because we are already into the last hour. Out of the 2 hours, I have utilized 1 hour. We'll see what are the best practices one can have criterion wise. Because as I said, if you want to improve, the best way is to go criterion wise. It almost covers everything for last 3 decades or so, right? So can you improve upon the implementation of the curricular implementation based on the feedback? Can you develop collaboration with other institutions for quality? Do you have some full-time or part-time technical courses that you are offering? Can that be a best practice in your institution? These are some of the best practices that I have taken from the NAAC's website only. Modular courses such as fashion design, spoken English, interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary courses. Now, Dr. Sankar sir would agree, and all of you would, that this is a challenge that we are facing. Can the new courses that you are developing as autonomous colleges or universities, can they be more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary? The extent to which you make multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary courses. Curricular internalization of values. There is a question in Criterion 1 which talks about integration of values into or cross-cutting issues into the curriculum. Can that be your best practice? Incorporation of traditional and indigenous values in modern curricula. There's no point missing in the indigenous values when you are developing modern curricula. So taking care of that, can that be done? And several others. Similarly, in teaching, learning and evaluation Criterion 2, can mentoring be your best practice? See, as of now, I see that most colleges, they have mentoring on paper alone. You have a list of mentor teachers, you have a list of mentee teachers, you have a schedule posted only for the sake of NAAC documentation. But is it there, the effective mentoring actually taking place for the students? Do they, approach you as per the schedule that you have allotted to them? And do you always actually in a situation to solve their problems, whether psychosocial or academic problems? So can mentoring system be a best practice in your institution? Various experiential methods, participatory methods such as fieldwork, etc. Can they be a number of fieldworks that you organize? In fact, number of experiential methods that you use in your institution. Can it be a best practice? Teacher what tutorial system, evaluation of teachers by the students. Skill development in physical education. This is what something we tried to do, but we could not succeed. Can you teach physical education through simulations, animations, etc.? Like in cricket, they talk about, the ball goes out swing and in swing when you, keep rough side on one side and smoother side of the ball on another side. So a lot of physics comes into play, dynamics come into play. So can you teach physical education through media assistance? Use of ICT, can it be a best practice? Development of MOOCs, again, I will tell you an example of Rajmohan College. Development of MOOCs, can it be your best practice? Developing competency of the teacher. Most of us, I always say that we are not trained teachers. So even though I have not studied B.Ed or M.Ed, can I offer something to my teachers so that they are as good as trained teachers? Competency. Examination reforms. Similarly, in research, innovation and extension, developing research competency, can it be a best practice? Better research ambience, research incentives for faculty, research cultures among undergraduate students, free food to poor patients, center for social action. Can you set up a center for social activities? Institute industry interface. As far as infrastructure is concerned, can you have sharing of infrastructure to nurture student talent? Technology assisted pedagogy, infrastructure for social transformation. Can you offer your infrastructure to others, organizations for social causes? Development of infrastructure to match academic growth, that is infrastructure augmentation, what we call, or adequate infrastructure, what we call in Criterion 4. Infrastructure for holistic student development, training students to use college library resources regularly every year, orienting them. Computer education for 100% students. All the students should be computer literate, basic computer literacy. Involving student in maintenance of infrastructure or upkeep of infrastructure, book reading competition, etc., etc. Similarly, if you go about student support progression, student counseling, affordable training for proficiency, placement cell, financial support services, involvement of alumni, grievance redressal, endowment scheme for student scholarships. If you talk about governance, leadership and management, transparency in employment. Now see how this can be a best practice. We are into an era where people are concerned about, there's this much amount asked by XYZ college. I'm qualified, but I'm not getting appointment. So transparency in employment, transparency in admission, participative management, decentralization in management, perspective planning and action taken report, performance appraisal, resource mobilization, staff welfare, regular academic and administrative audits. So several best practices in every criterion. In seventh criterion, which is institutional values and best practices, eco-friendly campus, value education, recycling of e-wastes, waste management, biodiversity conservation, women empowerment, gender audit, Divyang Mitra, that means you have a facility for disabled people in your institution. So now you can see that you have list of so many things that you can improve upon. I'll again go through this list. Go through this list again. And you will find that there are several areas where you need to improve upon. If I ask you, do you really have a genuine feedback mechanism which supports the curriculum development? Many of you would feel, no, we need to improve upon it. So in criterion 1, make this as a best practice. If I ask you that the courses that you offer, do they include the interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity? Can we improve upon it? You'll see, yeah, I need to improve upon it. If you go to criterion 2 and I ask you, do you really have an effective mentoring system for the students? You would say, no, I need to improve upon it. So if you are getting this answer consistently, I need to improve upon it, I need to improve upon it, I need to improve upon it. That means it has not yet converted into or developed into a best practice. So if you ask me, my mentoring system is not a best practice. If you ask me, skill development in physical education, use of ICT or development of MOOC or developing competency or examination reform, none of this is a best practice, I would say, as in my institution. If you talk about research competency, I would say I need to improve in every area. Probably extension, as I said, is the place where we are doing pretty good. But industry institute interface is something where we are lacking. I need to improve upon it. If I go to infrastructure, I would say technology assisted pedagogy, I have improved much in my institution. But then training the students to use college library resources is something I need to improve upon, because I have conducted program, but I do not see evidences in the form of the performance of students, the number of resources they are going through. Promoting them to go and read books, e-resources is something I need to improve upon. If I go through students at support and progression, many of our college would say, no, placement cell is not working well. No, we do not have any institutional scholarship for our students. No, our grievance redressal cell is just on paper. There are meetings taking place, but we do not have mechanism working actually the way it should be. No, we do not have an effective student counseling system. We have a committee, but it does not, meet regularly. Even the psychologist who is on the committee visits not much often, seldom he visits the institution. So you would say you need to improve upon many of these. Talking about criterion 6, you would say, yes, we need to work on more on staff welfare. Perspective plan is just a piece of paper that we present to the NAC peer team, but it is not the way that we should be going. So action taken report is out of question. We need to improve upon it. Performance appraisal, UGC is doing it as per the API, but as far as the unaided teachers are concerned, we are doing it somehow. Resource mobilization is poor because we are not fetching grants, much of them. Academic and administrative audit was conducted just before the NAC was about to come. So it is not a habit that we are having. So it needs to be habituated. Therefore, we can improve upon it. In criterion 7 also, we have eco-friendly campus, but e-waste, they have been lying. There are several monitors lying that like that only. There are several mice. There are several keyboards lying there. There are several capacitors, resistors, which are not reused. So we need to work on recycling on e-waste. We are doing a little bit with waste management, but we can improve upon it with certain tie-ups with other agencies such as the municipal corporation. We have not conducted gender audit, so we will probably conduct a gender audit and accordingly plan our gender sensitization action plan, so we can improve upon women empowerment as well. There is a scope for improvement. We do not have any physically disabled student, but we can make provision for Divyang students in case they get admitted to the students. We can make provision for it. So we can improve here also. So if you look at this list, you would realize there are lots of areas we can improve upon. So I hope you have realized that it is not picking up two practices from what we are doing good. It is in fact picking each and every process that you are not doing good and improve upon it so that you can make it as a best practice. Now, for you to get those 30, 4 scale in this 30 weightage question, the scale of 4, you want to get 120. What are the key areas to focus? As I said, number 1, the title of the best practice that you are mentioning in your SSR or AQR has to be catchy, a very good title. The title itself tells what it is all about. Number 2, you should be having a very clear objective and context to the practice you are claiming. And number 3, evidence of success. The rest of the things are coming, problems encountered and what other things, they're coming. But these 3 things are of prime importance. The title, the objective and context, and the evidence of success. We'll see how we can improve upon what practices you are having. Look at these, some of the examples. You all know this UPI, Bhim. Why do you think this name would have come? Now, this is a characteristic feature of, I guess, Modi government. Since when they came into power, they have made acronyms which will become popular. This app Bhim has nothing to do with Dr. Bhimrao Babasaheb Ambedkar. But because Dr. Ambedkar holds a lot of respect in the country, and this is easy to be remembered because everybody in India knows Bhimrao Ambedkar ji. Therefore, the acronym was developed, Bharat Interface for Money. I do not know how many people know it, but Bhim is so much easy to remember, and so this acronym. Similarly, there used to be a Yojana Ayog, Planning Commission, and this government renamed it as Niti Ayog. I'm not pro-Modi or anti-Modi. I'm just trying to make you aware of what catchy names can do. Niti Ayog. And what is Niti? National Institution for Transforming India. And in Hindi, Niti is policy. So see, Niti in Hindi is policy. And what is reflected and expected from this Ayog is policy making for the country. So National Institution for Transforming India. So if you have policies, you can transform the nation. So you can clearly associate what should be happening in this. So I give you an example. One of the best practices that we have been quoting for last 2 years or 3 years is Swavalamban. Even though you all are coming from, many of you are coming from southern part of India, you are much aware of Sanskrit, so you know what Swavalamban is. The meaning of what Swavalamban is to be self-reliant. And therefore, this catchy word has something behind it. And what is it having behind it? It is scheme of financial assistance to needy students at the risk of dropout. So I make it clear in the brackets, parenthesis. Scheme of financial assistance to needy students at the risk of dropout. So see, the idea is very, very noble. All those students who are not taking admission or who are not taking education, saying that they are not having enough money to pay their tuition fees, we have a scheme for you, financial assistance for you. And we call these schemes as Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana and Swabhiman Kosh. Swabhiman is self-respect. A student, when he's taking some money from somebody, he should not lose his self-respect. That is also an important thing. And our students very proudly say, sir, we have taken money from Swabhiman Kosh and we feel proud about it because they work for it. They work for it, they get the money. And under Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana, when they take the money, they return it back when they're employed. So we do not give them anything for free. This is the help that we are offering when they need it. but they return it because we want to take care of their self-respect. We do not want to hurt their self-respect. And that is Swavalamban, being self-reliant. So this is how you can make your practices having a title which is very catchy. A catchy title should be there. Second thing that I was talking about is, if you can go back to this list, objective and the context, and then the evidence of success. So I will tell you the objective and context of this scheme that we had run in our institution. It was, say, around some 9 years back, that some of the students from professional courses such as BBA and BBSCA, they went to the management council in our institution and they said, sir, we are not able to take admission to these courses because the government has stopped scholarships for OBC students in professional courses. The scholarships are still available for SC and ST students, but for OBC students, the scholarships have been stopped in professional courses. Now, these students were very, bright students. And the problem was genuine. They really did not have that much of money. And in Maharashtra, the part where I come from, there are lots of students who come from other backward classes, OBC. So the problem was genuine. So that was the context. With this context, the objective was to offer them some financial aid so that they are not denied of admission. They would be able to pay their tuition fee. But with this objective, we also had objective to make them self-reliant, to take care of their self-respect as well. So with this objective and with this context, we started this best practice called as Swavalamban, which included both of these, Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana and Swabhiman Kosh. The third thing is evidence. Whatever you are doing, you have to prove it. Since then, as I told you, 2011-12, since then, several students have been taking advantage of both of these schemes. This is the data which we have for the Earn and Learn scheme, which your institution might be having supported by your university. But look at this thing which we have. There is a share which is offered by the college in addition to share offered by the university. So the university share under Earn and Learn scheme, where students earn in the work in the college and they earn some money so that they can pay their tuition fee. The university share in the last 5-6 years has remained more or less constant. But when our management realized that there are several other students who need to be taken care of, I have limited amount of money from the university. If I give to more students, limited share would come to each student. If I give limited amount of share to all the students, less number of students will be covered. So what do I do? And therefore, we started with this. We started offering college share under something which we call as Swabhiman Kosh. So you can see here, we have started this in last 3 years only. Earlier, we did not have an endowment for this. Later on, we had an endowment. And as soon as we have an endowment for this, you can notice in 2018-19, rupees 5,70,810 were spent for supporting the student. So you see increase in the number of students who were supported under this scheme. Earlier, we used to support around 250-300 students, and you see suddenly the number has gone up to around 600. And look at the amount from 4 lakh. We are now offering more than 13 lakh, around 14 lakh rupees to the students of Earn and Learn scheme every year. These numbers speak of the success of this scheme. Now, look at this from the perspective of a student who could take up his education and later on make his livelihood because of this small help offered by the institution. That students have worked for more than 24,000 hours, and now you can see around 30,000 hours in the college. They do barcoding, they work in accounts, they do some gardening jobs in the college, and they earn money so that they can take up the education. Look at another evidence, another set of Under the Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana, if a student who wants to take admission in BSc Computer Science is not able to pay a tuition fee of around 27,000, we started this Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana. We said, okay, take this amount, pay your tuition fee. Whenever you feel you are able to either repay this fee in installment, or if you are not able to pay, you pay it after you are employed whenever you want. You see, every year around 30 to 40 students are taken care of, and around rupees 5,50,000 are spent on this. Till 2018-19, around 143 students were offered a scholarship, a 0% interest financial support of rupees 22 lakh, more than 22 lakh. And I'm happy to tell you that around 7 lakh rupees have been paid back by the students, and we do not go back to students asking for money. They come back on themselves. And they repay, sir, I had taken this much amount from the institution, we want to pay back. I am happily employed now. We do not go and ask the students for the amount. So this is what you can see, the amount of endowment that we have generated from Swabhiman Kosh. Rupees 71,000 it started with in 16-17. The amount has now been raised to 45 lakh. The total amount is now 53,65,145. And amount of students benefited through Swabhiman Kosh in addition to Earn and Learn scheme is 1,194. So how many lives we could change with this scheme? That makes it as a best practice. Now there are problems which arise. What is the problem? The system that we work on is, if a student is not having enough money, for example, a zoology student is not having enough money to pay the fee, he should come to me and I will sign a form taking moral responsibility of the student, that this student is a genuine student, he is a needy student, he is a bright student, he is a student who needs help. So I take a moral responsibility. Please provide him this financial aid. So the problem is that the teachers sometimes feel that this is a financial responsibility that they are taking, financial undertaking that they are taking, and therefore they are afraid of taking that responsibility. And therefore we counsel the teachers sometimes. So this is how this appears as one of the best practice in my institution. Lastly, there are a couple of slides only. I'll leave 15-20 minutes for discussion as well, if there are some points to be discussed. Last year, in Union Public Service Commission mains examination, you would see that the question appeared was, in Hindi it is, Sarvottam Karya Pranali se behtar Karya Pranaliyan bhi hoti hain. And in English it reads, there are better practices to best practices. An essay has been asked to be written on this particular topic. There are better practices to best practices. Now the question is, how can you describe this? The answer is, many times when people talk to us and they talk about best practice, they said, sir, do you have some format? And that is the problem. My dear teachers, my best practice that I just told you has a context, has a background. And therefore, the best practices are not a one-size-fits-all solution. So the best practice that I am having in my institution has certain context which we faced. You may not see the same context in your institution, and therefore this may not be applicable as it is to your institution. Therefore, there are better practices to best practice. So you can improve upon what I am having. Better practices to best practices. Second point, as I said, because the context is different, you will have a different practice altogether. Third thing is, best practices have short-term tendencies. It does not look into a bigger picture. So as soon as I am developing a best practice, there is every possibility that I'll become complacent. So it has short-term tendencies. And therefore, there is a need that I step back sometime, go back and examine the things. If everything is all right, or should there be any correction in it? And the result therefore is, we started Swavlamban only with Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana. You won't believe another good thing about that Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana we have. One of our alumnus has contributed 78 lakh rupees to the endowment that we are having. We started with 22 lakh and he added 78 lakh. Today we have a corpus of rupees 1 crore 20 lakh rupees odds for Vidyadhan Kalash Yojana. And from the dividends and interest, etc., we are offering help to the students. But then when we realize there are several other things that we students are afraid to take up scholarships, teachers are afraid to take the moral responsibility of the students. Can we offer them some other thing? So step back and examine, and then we came up with that Swabhiman course for earn and learn student. So step back and examine is another thing. And therefore, in a nutshell, what I want to offer you as the message is, it's not about being the best. It's about being better than you were yesterday. So even though it sounds like best practices, I would say, in fact, I was reading some of the literature. It also said that it is time to move from best practices to better practices. Because when you are talking about better practices, you are talking about continuous improvement. And that is what we are expected to bring. So with this, offering you all my best wishes to inculcate improvement in all the practices that you are having in your institution, I'll stop and open the session for any questions that you might be having. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Wish you best luck. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful explanation about the best practices in each criterion. We have some few questions in the chat box. Shall I ask, sir?
Please do.
So one participant had asked about the corpus fund. Can you explain in detail, sir? They had asked about the corpus fund.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Corpus fund is a kind of fund that you keep you can call it as a reserve fund. Yeah, you do not spend it directly. You keep that fund as a reserve fund. And whatever processes that you do, it's a kind of a money that you require, that you utilize in case of any urgency. So that 1 crore 20 lakh rupees that you are talking about is we have kept as a reserve. And we will not be spending that 1 crore 20 lakh rupees. Whatever expenditure we are making is out of the interest out of it. If there is any emergency, then probably I'll be utilizing it.
Oh, thank you, sir. There is another question. He has asked about how long a program is to be carried out to be identified as a best practice.
Yeah, let me read it once again. How long
a program is to be carried out to be identified as a best practice.
Right. Now you have seen in the examples that I have given, it all started from say around 2012 in that particular example. Now, for you to be convinced and for you to convince others, you need to have ample evidences. I do not know how many are from sciences background or even in humanities or commerce, etc. Whenever you are performing an experiment, then you have to repeat it, at least 3 times. So when you repeat it at least 3 times, you are sure that it is not a fluke that is taking place. This has become a habit. So if I do it once only, I'm not sure it will happen again. And therefore, I will have to repeat it twice. But I will have to do it thrice to ensure that it has become habit. So at least 3 years is important till you are sure that 1, you are having evidence of success, and 2, that you have habituated to it, you have internalized it.
Thank you, sir. There is another question that how will the affiliated colleges make best practices with their limited resources?
Affiliated colleges making best practices from the limited resources that they are having.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, like best practices is a very broad topic. This question is also a very broad question which addresses a lot of problems that we may face. I would rather suggest that you have several things that you can do. For example, human resource development. You are saying that you are having limited resources. I would say you have 20 teachers, 100 teachers. Can you make all your 20 teachers best? Can you make all your 20 teachers all round? Can you make all your 20 teachers ICT literate? Can you make all your teachers do documentation online, etc.?
And how?
Right. So
And how we changed it?
I'll take. Can you please excuse me for 2 seconds? There is Vande Mataram going on in our institution. I need to stand up. 2 minutes, please. Yeah, thank you very much, and really sorry. Yes, so continuing addressing that particular question, that yes, we do have a lot of problems, no, facing the affiliated colleges. But there are several areas where we can work upon. For example, you would say that as an affiliated college, I do not have liberty to redesign my curriculum. All right, but you have liberty to have so many other methods for internal evaluation. Do you make utilization of the several internal evaluation methods? Can you bring in the examination reforms? Leave alone those methods which are necessary for your university evaluation. But your internal evaluation, which will not be counted in the mark list, can be done by you, right? So monitoring of program outcomes or course outcomes, can you fix it in such a way that it becomes one of the best monitoring methods of outcomes in your institution? So there are several areas where you can work. Instead of finding what you cannot do, you should be finding what are those areas where you can improve. Yeah, any more questions? If you want, I can read out them as well.
Yes, sir. May I add something here?
Yes, of course, Kangure sir.
Yes. Yeah. Regarding the same question, that financial resources, it is not every time required for to have a best practice or to establish a best practice in your institution. It's not necessary that every time you should have money. It's not that. You can utilize your expertise, you can utilize your talent, you can utilize your services or whatever you are having inside you. You can utilize it for your students to make it as a best practice. So don't get this under attention that such resources are not available at your place. Therefore, we can't have this type of best practices. It is your skill. It is your attitude. It is outcome of your ideas. That is what required in higher education. So to have a best practice in your institution, we require a quality people, good people, thoughtful people, working people, those who are going for initiatives. Whenever such things comes there, then it is possible to have best practices without single penny having in an institution. So that can be a best part that can be added in any of the institution. When we think over this type of best practices in affiliated or the institutions which are in a resource crunch. That was my point here. Over to you.
True, I'll supplement this what Professor Kangude is saying. Just now I stood up and Vande Mataram was playing in my institution. It is a routine process in my institution that Rashtragan is played in the morning and Rashtrageet is played in the evening. It does not require any money, but it inculcates value. The citizenship, it inculcates. So it does not require any money. So it is not that all the time you require some money. You can do various things apart from that as well.
Yes. That's it.
Thank you, Kangure sir, for your input.
Yeah.
Next, one more question, sir.
Yeah.
Can we show empowerment of girls as best practices?
Can we show?
Empowerment of girls as best practices.
Enrollment or employment of girls?
Empowerment.
Empowerment. Yes, you can show. But, you need to have a solid background for this, because, what I'm afraid of these days is in my classes, there are 120 girls and there are 20 boys. If you go on empowering girls like this, there will be one boy in my class and 140 girls. So how do you arrive at a conclusion that you need to empower girls also? There are boys also who are looking for empowerment, and they do not have any direction. They're wayward, right? So this has to come through an exercise such as gender audit, where you would see there are certain areas where girls need that empowerment. So what are those areas where girls need empowerment? For example, in my institution, we found out that girls' participation in sports activities is less. So how can I promote girls' participation or girls' empowerment sports activities? So you need to find some base to, that is what we call as context in which you want the empowerment of the girls. Well, now, for example, A.P.C. Mahalaxmi College for women, it's a women college already. You are already taken effort for women empowerment. So what more can you do, right?
One more question.
Yeah.
What is the benchmark to decide best practices?
Now, there is no benchmark. See, you have seen in the database that I had shown. For example, it started with 8 odd students. I told you, when we were talking about the best practices and parameters for best practices, the second step was implementation. When we start implementation, it always starts with a small number. So maybe I will, practice the thing in one small department with few students, one faculty maybe. So it will always start with 1 student, 5 students, 1 department. And gradually you want to take it to a large extent so that it is reflected as at the whole institution. So I have around 5,800 students in my institution. Out of these 5,800 students, last year 420 students took up student research. It may sound good to me, but there is always a scope. Why not all 5,800 students? So 420 is a good number, but can I improve upon this number and reach up to 500 odd next year, 600 odd next year, 4,000 odd the next year? But then there is another thing to be taken care of, which I had made it a point, is that your best practice should not overshadow any other process in the institution. If I ask my 5,800 students to take up research, everybody is doing research only. One teacher, how many research projects he or she will guide? So you need to stop somewhere, right? So you do not have a defined benchmark, but this is for you to decide.
Thank you, sir. You have explained all the doubts we had in a wonderful way with great examples that made us understand clearly. The less number of queries in the chat box, you can clearly explain that the participants have no doubts in your presentation. We are very happy to have your presentation, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
There is some raised hand. Someone has raised his hand. Dr. B. Anjana, someone is there. He's raising his hand.
Dr. B. Anjaneyulu, do you want to ask some question? In fact, there was another question.
Yeah.
I missed it.
I'll go for it.
If we change our best practice in 3 years, then how can we show it in the website which AQR asks? Yeah, good question, Sasmita madam. The NAC does not ask you to put 2 best practice on the website. In SSR, you are supposed to address only 2 best practices. You can explain 10 best practices on your website. So that is not a problem. However, when they land on the link, they should be able to find the best practices elaborated by you. In the SSR, they should be elaborated. Only 2 needs to be elaborated in the SSR. On website, you can put any number of best practices. Dr. B. Anjaneyulu, did you want to ask anything? Okay, I guess he's not there. Thank you very much.
There are some
Again,
hand raises there.
yeah, Vandita T. Shahu.
Please unmute her. Please unmute her.
Good evening, sir. The session was amazing. And
you.
thank you so much for such wonderful information. So actually, I have written so many times the proposal for DST, but none of them are accepted. Can you tell me which all heads should be definitely included in a proposal so that it can be an acceptable proposal?
Well, there is a lot I need to know about proposal. I do not know your background, Vandita madam, from what subject are you coming from and what the proposal was. And so at this moment, I'm not in a situation to comment why your proposal was rejected. But I'm sure, yeah, but I'm sure if DST has rejected, they might be having some better proposal to fund. It is not that case that your proposal was bad, but probably they had better proposals to fund at that time. So I'll only be able to comment on this once I can see your proposal.
Okay, so I request for some guidelines from you in the future if I want to ask.
Stay connected. I have shared my phone number and email ID. Stay connected.
Thank you so much, sir.
Any more questions? Yeah, I mean, there's one question which has been answered by Mohammed Samuel. What is Earn While Learn program? Yeah, students are offered opportunity to work in the campus itself so that they are paid some amount for working an hour, maybe 45 rupees in our college. So they utilize this amount to pay their tuition fees. So that is Earn While Learn program. Yeah, apart from that, I do not see any new question coming up in the chat box. So that is all. We can stop with the permission of the organizers.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
This is Dr. A.K. Shahinamol from Kerala.
Yeah.
Actually, my question is not exactly related with best practices. I don't know whether I can put my question right now.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So the session was well explained and highly informative also. Thank you so much for your wonderful power of communication and the content of your session. And the question is actually, so would you please explain the difference between the community outreach program and extension program?
Yeah. This is a common question which is generally asked. See, there is a difference between extension and outreaches. Say, for example, I come from Department of Zoology. There are certain things in my subject that I can offer to society. But there are certain things which I can offer to society which do not have any association with my subject, for example. If I talk about zoology again, if you know about organic farming and vermicomposting, this is my subject. And if I take organic farming and vermicomposting to the society, that is extension activity. So extension is extension of my subject to the society. And outreach is something I do without any context to the subject that I'm studying or teaching. For example, if I'm a part of cleanliness drive, so it has nothing to do with zoology, right? If I'm volunteering as with police sub-constable during the Ganesh idol immersion, so it has nothing to do with zoology. If I am doing tree plantation, it has nothing to do with zoology for that matter. So something that I do without any connection with my subject, that is outreach, going into the society, and something that I offer to the society through my subject is called as extension activity. Could I satisfy your question, ma'am? Sahina, madam?
Okay. Sir, in that case, what about the stakeholders in both cases?
What
should the stakeholders or the stakeholders should be exactly from outside the college for in both cases?
Yeah, finally you are reaching out to society. But
Okay.
in extension activity, it may not be society at large. It may not be society at large. But in outreach activity, you have to go into the society.
Suppose the thing is that, so suppose if I'm offering an invited lecture from my own area to a neighboring college.
No, that is not extension activity, ma'am.
It will be an extension activity, right?
It won't be.
If your students are getting benefited by that activity, which is conducted for the society, and students are learning something through that activity, then it becomes an extension activity. Otherwise, when activity is done by you for some other person, some other outside the society, then it becomes an outreach. Outreach and syllabus has no connection, not needed to have a connection. But extension and your syllabus must have connection. That is the condition.
Yeah.
That is the differentiation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
There are raised hands from Dr. Arunachalam, Dr. Gamandi.
Arunachalam and Gamandi. I think these are two questions.
Yeah. Please unmute yourself, Dr. Arunachalam.
Good evening, sir. The section is very nice. But in my view, day by day, the admission in the engineering college is getting down.
Yeah.
Even nowadays, everyone says computer science, artificial intelligence, and data science only now going on.
Yeah.
Other subject, mechanical, civil, and even including chemistry. In my subject, Anna University framed only one semester only. Even chemistry is a very important subject, I have informed. But in general, they have proposed in the one semester only. So the chemistry stuffs are affected now teaching in environmental science in the second semester. In my view, chemistry, if you say the fertilizer and the pesticide, we have positively used in environmental science in that case. What is your opinion in that area?
I'll not comment much on chemistry. I'll give you simple. I can understand what you are asking about. I'll comment something on what I read the other day. There was a famous comment made last week or somewhere. There's nothing called as forensic science. Try to understand what I'm telling you. There's nothing called as forensic science. Forensic science is nothing but the methods and techniques borrowed from the basic sciences. And this is what is happening to chemistry also, or for that matter, physics also. So radiochemistry, nuclear physics, that physics, this biology, biophysics and whatnot. What would biophysics would be? What different it would be from physics and biology? So you merge 2 or 3 things together and come up with some fancy name again. So India has been bugged with these fancy words. And therefore, the students have also gone in the flow. And now people realize that a degree in BSc biotechnology, how harmful can it be? I read a joke somewhere. They said that मैं आज भी उस आदमी को ढूंढ रहा हूं जिसने कहा था बायोटेक्नोलॉजी कर लो बहुत स्कोप है. In English, it means I am still finding a man who told me do biotechnology. It has a lot of scope. Now the problem is once you get too much specialized at an early level, you have limited your options. And that was the beauty with the conventional graduations that we were doing, studying botany, zoology, chemistry in all the 3 years. And now we are getting back this way or that way to the same thing, talking about interdisciplinarity, talking about multidisciplinarity. So the problem with us in our education system is that we tend to borrow so much from the European system, American system, this system, that system, that we have lost our system in all this mix. And therefore, we will have to address our system in a way that we can address the diversity in the nation. See, we are different from all other nations. We are different from America. We are different from Germany. We are different from Britishers. In that they have monotony in their cultures. We are diverse in culture. So we'll have to address it accordingly. We have been trying to address the importance of basic sciences in India for the last 1 decade or so. Before DBT Star Scheme, there was no scheme introduced for undergraduate students. That this is the only scheme for undergraduate students. And students have realized the importance for this. And therefore, we see institutions like ICERs coming up, which are focusing on science as well as research and teaching together. So I hope and I can be positive, like Dr. Vijay Joshi from Mumbai says that he's he's highly optimistic, hopelessly optimistic. So I'm also hopelessly optimistic that yes, days for basic science would come, Dr. Arunachalam.
Yeah, I would like to add just one thing here.
Yes, sir, please.
Now, young teachers have to keep their plan B ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, plan B ready, should be ready.
Yes.
Otherwise, there is an issue of survival if you don't have plan B ready with you. That is the message of the time. That is how the entire things are changing. And if you are not able to absorb these changes, then automatically you will be out of the system. So that is the best thing one can go for that. Let's have a plan B ready right from these today. Then it will, there is some chance you will survive in the future.
True.
That is the case here. Yeah.
You're right, Gauri sir. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And Srihari sir, I think the pressure you said that was placed on your head has become a pleasurable one, I suppose, now, because we could have seen that there were more than 500 participants staying throughout the presentation and raising queries in the chat box and pouring in positive comments also. Thank you very much for for sharing all the best practices from your college and other colleges as well. Definitely certain practices do add commendable value to an institution, and it much lies on how we identify them. So definitely benchmarking will help us in that way to reach great heights. And you have shown us how to identify our strength, weakness, opportunity, and challenges. And another one interesting thing you said was the 4 I's in identification, implementation, institutionalization, and internalization of all the practices. And so I feel that when we identify these practices, institutionalize them, and when we disseminate these practices to other institutions as well. You are here following the motto of our cluster, not competition, but definitely cooperation by sharing all the practices which you have been following. So definitely if we focus on our institutional goals, sustainability is there for sure. So thank you very much for that enlightening and enriching experience you've given us. And thank you, Gauri sir, for supplementing certain questions here. So once again, I thank all the participants for your patient listening on this 5th day of the FDP. Thank you, everyone. Hope to meet you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
very nice.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, very nice. Okay.
Thank you, Srihari sir. Thank you, Gauri sir.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
joining.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lily ma'am, see
Yeah.
you.
Okay, see you all.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you, sir.